notice what we call a dense pocket of fat. And that dense pocket of fat is literally, you can grab a hold of it almost like it had a handle. We'll tell people when you grab that brisket, you're going to look at that, you're going to look at how thick the fat is on the other side, but do the flop test. So grab that brisket and start flopping like this. The whole thing flops. That means I have less fat running from that dense pocket here to the other side. Okay, so that means, I'm paid, $2.70 a pound. I'm typically going to churn off at least 2 or 3 pounds of fat. If I have a lot more fat inside of that pocket, the more I'm going to have to lose, and it's cost me. Anyway.
So you're looking for it to flop?
I'm looking for the flop, and I'm looking for a smaller pocket of dense fat there.
Okay.
I'm also looking for a thinner layer of dense fat along the top.
What about the color of the fat?
The color of the fat is indicative of how they've stored it. Older cows that you may buy from a private butcher or a farmer tend to come from an older stock, which would tend to lead towards more of a yellow type of fat.
Okay.
If it's left out on the dock too long, it will absorb a lot of that blood, and then the fat becomes a much redder color to it. Also, in these cryovac packages, if it's loose anywhere, avoid it. Okay? Because you've got some level of contamination already started on that. So what I look for on this one is I look for a smaller, dense pocket of fat, and I also look for a thin amount of fat along the same ridge as that pocket of fat. So I think I picked out a pretty decent one here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to trim this up because I want to get rid of that pocket of fat. And there's, and I mentioned earlier that there's a good fat and bad fat. Now on a brisket, the bad fat is that dense, thick fat that you're not going to be able to smoke through. It will not melt. A lot of cooks will tell you, leave a quarter inch or so of fat on there because it'll melt away. If it's bad fat, it's not going anywhere. It's just going to stay there, and you're going to block the penetration of
The
any
big question is this good fat or bad fat?
That's good fat. This is bad fat. And it's like, it's almost like when you knock on it, it's like knocking on a hammer. So, first thing I like to do in order to know just exactly how deep I'm going to cut in on that pocket of fat is I take and I will slice lengthwise on the brisket, because there tends to be a thick layer of grizzle that runs along that. This is a part of the cow that actually is separated by 2 pieces of real thick muscles, and what you'll end up with is a thick layer of cartilage there that this butcher actually did a nice job of trimming this up. But you may also find that it may have sat out there and kind of got a little brown. So what I'm just trying to do here is identify exactly how much of this I'm going to end up having to trim off and know exactly where that pocket of fat stops. I'm going to go in and I'm just going to follow the line of that. You'll end up feeling with your knife skills where that pocket goes. And again, like we did with the rack of ribs, you could use a paper towel to help you pull that apart. Once you get through there, you'll come up to the top.
By the way, if you're listening on KRG right now, you can see video of Craig Dahlquist trimming this brisket at OKFoodie.com.
I'm just trying to get rid of this pocket here. There is some good fat that's still inside the middle of the brisket that I'll end up keeping because that does help keep that. Well, here, let's show you this. This is how thick this stuff is. I mean, you can literally knock on it and hear how dense that is. You can't push through it, so it will not melt. It will not go anywhere. It's just going to block the penetration of smoke. And obviously with flavor printing, smoke is the key to a brisket. Brisket has a lot of collagen fibers in it. You're trying to break all that down. The more you can get rid of in the start of it, the better success you're going to have. You'll also notice on the top of this brisket that there tends to be a lot of fat, and there's a thick fibrous membrane on that as well. Sinew skin, you want to get rid of that as well. So you can trim through that. I like to just grab a hold of the fat and pull up. A nice sharp knife will be able to pull that apart. Again, what I like to do when I'm cutting is I use the dull side of the blade to push down and allow as I'm pulling the meat apart.
And you're using a boning or filleting knife as opposed to the chef's knife.
Yes.
Nice thin blade.
So I can sit here and trim that up all day long. The point is that I want to try and get rid of as much of that as possible, because as long as I keep that on there, it's not going to allow that meat to relax. wax and absorb the smoke. So you can sit there and scour it like this, real lightly, just enough to kind of break through it. You can kind of already see it, how it's loosening up a little bit there.
Yep.
So just a little bit like that. You don't have to cut it all the way off. Sometimes it's really thin, but you want to get rid of it enough just so it can kind of open up. You can kind of see how it just kind of allowed it to open up a little bit there. I'm going to flip this over and go along the back side of that same pocket, and we'll show you here. I've got this thick pocket right here. I can take my knife and just pushing down again on the dull side. I can feel where that fat is going. Go right inside of there. I'm just going to cut straight down from the top into that pocket and cut away all that bad fat. Now this is a lot of the restaurants that I used to go and frequent in Kansas City would just take and throw these on their hole, and they'll worry about cutting that off in the side. But again, we're talking about competition here. I'm trying to get as much flavor in every part of that meat as I can. And I don't tend to worry about after. I'm worried about what's happening before here. So I get rid of that. I've got essentially a little bit of a pocket of fat running through there. The last part that I'm going to look at here is right along the edge, where I have this little fair layer of fat right here. And I can just simply take, based on how I've cut that on the side, and know exactly where I need to go to trim along the top here.
But the rest of that, and there's a considerable amount of the surface area of that other side of the brisket is covered with fat, but this is, I take it, good fat.
This is good fat. And you get to a point where you can kind of see how it's kind of jelly. There's a little bit of denseness underneath it, but I'm just going to cut off enough so that I'm left with about 1/4 to 1/2 inch of fat on there. I'm not so worried about the top part here. This is where I'm actually, when I put this on the smoker, I'm going to put it fat side down for about the first 30 to 45 minutes. The purpose of that is similar to what you would do with a chicken. Is you don't start cooking a chicken until the fat's all rendered off. So with the brisket, what I'm trying to do is cook it to a point to where that fat jellies up so that it can literally start soaking through the meat as it's cooking. But if I put it on top, it doesn't quite get the effect to it. Plus it also, I get a nice little grill marks along the top from the nice little sear. So I can go through here and just trim a little bit of this off. Again, this is the piece that we really kind of reference the plumping to, because I can throw this thing down on a grill like that to cover the whole grill. Have a lot of surface area covered. But if I take this thing and I push that together, you can see how it will literally just, these areas here, if I were to go through and trim that out even more, I literally get a lot more plumpness to the meat that adds actually to the cooking process. You dry it out slower. You don't have to worry about the bark and everything kind of soaking out all the moisture.
That is maybe the best tip that we've gotten, I mean, both for the ribs and for the brisket, and I've never heard of that.
You can literally do that with every cut of meat you put on the grill. Think about a steak. You know, if you have it all stretched out and it's a 1/2 inch thick, versus you push it together and plump it up and it's now 3/4 or 1 inch thick, makes a huge difference in the cooking time, everything.
There's a secret, folks.
So now in a competition, what we would do is I would trim all this off. I'd go in a little bit deeper on the pocket here, get a little bit more of that out. But you kind of get the gist of where we're going, but an extremely sharp knife is